Well, today I am super excited in particular to be interviewing Christine Carter. She has a PhD in sociology and she has written this book called The New Adolescence, Raising Happy and Successful Teens in an Age of Anxiety and Distraction. And now I have a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old. And I know I desperately need tips in this area because the world has changed so much. And Christine's research has gone right into how to parent in this new day and age where it's so different. We've got all these new things that we never had to deal with, the social media, the things like sexting and vaping, and it's a whole new world, and it's all changed in the last 10 years or so. So this is brand new, and Christine has put all her time and energy into researching it for us. So we are so grateful, and we believe every parent needs to read this book right now. So we're going to pick the brain of Christine today, and she's all the way over in California, and it's 3 o'clock over there, I believe, and 10 o'clock here. So welcome. Lovely to have you. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you for having me. It's fun since we can't travel to at least travel in this way. I'm happy to be with you on Zoom.
Yes, and you've got a few books already before this one, haven't you? Can you give us a little bit of a brief background of your writing and your research?
Absolutely. So I am a sociologist, and I study the sociology of well-being for the most part. So my last book was about how to sustain high performance. Really, it's called The Sweet Spot: How to Accomplish More by Doing Less. And that came right out of my own life. I teach what I need to know, right? So that book was really about how to balance raising kids and working, and and it's really relevant for working from home, whether or not you are a parent. The book before that was called Raising Happiness, and I wrote that when my kids were really little, and that's really applying all of the positive psychology to child rearing and trying to figure it out then. So of course, when my kids became teenagers, I needed to write the book on adolescence because things had changed so much. Raising Happiness does not even have a chapter on technology, right? Which is amazing to me to think about now, because technology is in every aspect of our children's lives from the time that they're born until all the way through, for the rest of their lives, it will be.
So how old are your children now?
They are 18, 19, 20, and almost 21.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
I know. It's really so, and adolescence is a really interesting thing, right? Because you've got an 11 and a 13-year-old. Is that what you said?
13-year-old daughter. She's going into year 8, and my son's going into grade 6. So yeah, I'm at the start of it.
Yes, you're at the start of it. We think of, we call kids adolescents, we call them teenagers, but adolescence is really a very long decade. With girls, it starts around age 9 or 10, a few years before the onset of puberty as we see it. Their brains really start changing, and they continue changing, for boys until they're 26 or 27. And so adolescence is this period of time in which their brains are changing really rapidly. It is the most brain development that we see, aside from in the womb, actually, in terms of the sheer remodeling of the brain and then that growth. And so it is a very important time period. It's just really long. It's much longer than we typically think of it as being.
Yep. So where do we even start? Okay, I've got, for all the mums out there, the teenagers are starting high school. We know that the social media side of things is huge. How do we start putting in strategies right from high school age?
Yeah, so this has been an interesting thing with the pandemic because kids are spending so much more time on screens. And
Mm,
so the first thing that I will say is not all technology is bad, right? Not all screens are bad. And it's not a disaster if they're spending a lot of time on screens. I like parents to sort of move away from monitoring and policing screen time to really looking at what behaviors on screens do need to be monitored
right.
at different ages. That's going to be different things. Middle school, or I don't know what you call it, where like the years right before high school are really perilous on social media, for example. That is a high monitoring time.
Mhm.
A lot of parents don't monitor their kids once they're on various social media platforms because they're not even really sure how. The problem with that is that the kids think that they know what they're doing and they make a lot of mistakes.
Mm,
And there are mistakes that can have really profound effects on their social worlds. And
mm,
so we want to be there to support them when they make those mistakes. There aren't any kids that don't make mistakes in
mm.
this. They're learning. And the kids who aren't making mistakes aren't really actively participating.
Mm.
So it's the kind of thing that we actually really need to be with them to support them when they make mistakes, to help them understand why what they did was a mistake. Usually that's the piece that they don't get. They don't always see what they've done as a mistake. What they saw was that it got them a lot of attention, for
Yeah.
example.
Mhm.
And then they also really need us to talk to them about how it all makes them feel.
Mm,
So that they can understand that, social media really primes kids for comparison. And we're really seeing a lot of anxiety in girls that is related to the judgment and the comparison that they are exposing themselves to through constant social media use.
mm.
So a lot of kids will learn to be self-monitoring when they realize, oh, if I spend the entire day on Instagram, I feel terrible at the end of
Mm.
the day, right?
Yeah.
Like we need to help them understand that these things affect the way that they feel and that
Mm,
they are in more control um, if they want to be, right?
mm.
They're designed to be addictive. They're very compulsive. I'm not saying that we can just use willpower to control our social media use, nor do I think our kids can do that. They definitely can't.
Mm.
But we can help in our families create times and spaces where compulsive media checking isn't even a possibility because there are
Yeah.
no devices in the room,
Mm,
right? No devices in our family. This is like, people think I'm completely crazy, but it has been a great thing.
mm.
When our kids we've never allowed devices in the car unless it was like a really long road trip and then it was a special occasion. So when our kids now, they drive themselves, they don't expect to be looking at their texts while they're driving,
Yes.
right? Driving is like they look out the window.
Fantastic. When you were saying too about social media and when they're starting, what age? I know my children have had friends that have had it before the recommended age, and then by the time my child gets it, it's like everyone has it, and I'm the one left out. Do you believe there is a certain age that is appropriate? And if the parent is very strict and says, no, you're not having it at all, can that then isolate them as well?
Well, I think it's very individual. I think that most of these kids are getting it too early, and to remember that these things they are very similar to addictive substances,
Mm,
right? The earlier they get addicted, the harder it will be for them to recover from that. So age matters a lot. And the younger they are, the more trouble they tend to get into with it. So I say delay, delay, delay,
mhm,
and really support them so that they have a lot of in-person friendship activities, right? This is very
mm,
hard during a pandemic, but during normal times, right? It's if you're going to keep kids off of social platforms, then in-person friendship and social activity is a bazillion times better for them in
mm,
many, many ways. They will not feel isolated if
mm,
they have friends. and they have ways of meeting with their friends. So two of my kids aren't on social media at all right now, and and we are still locked down here in California, but they will go for hikes on wearing masks with friends, and they're not actually as isolated as you might think, because they see peers every day.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So when you say you're not necessarily setting limits as such, you're not saying you can have it for 2 hours a day or whatever. It's more about the self-monitoring and learning how to know when enough's enough. Is that what you're?
Well, I just think it's a losing battle to say, oh, like, all right, your 2 hours starts now, and there are technologies, and I did use them to help me monitor their devices and to limit times. You don't want them on all the time. Better though is to just create times and spaces in your family life in which there are no devices available to be on. So meal times, homework, while you're doing your homework, they might need to be on a computer, but they need to have all social media and everything closed, and that can be in a public space. So you can sort of see if they're playing video games or watching YouTube or on social media, right? And in the car, if you're still going places in the car. And then the key thing is bedtime. This is what, we are seeing a real spike in depression and anxiety, and that spike really started at the advent of, when these devices became sort of widespread among adolescents. So there is a connection. The interesting thing is that spike evens out when we look at the data, if you control for sleep. And so one of the ways that these devices are hurting our kids is by interrupting their sleep. And it's because they're very stimulating, right? And so kids are staying awake while on the devices, but then of course the blue light interrupts the quality of their sleep, and they have more to be anxious about if they're comparing themselves to other people and checking compulsively. So charging those devices outside of their bedrooms. I recommend kids' devices get charged in the parents' closet. That's because if you charge them in the kitchen, they'll just sneak out of bed and check in the kitchen when there's like a big social drama or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great tip. So in general, would you be suggesting to not allow devices in bedrooms at all, or is it just
not in bedrooms at all? I mean, we do charge we have a charging station. We had a plug installed in one of the closets that the kids would have to like wake us up to get to. But yeah, no, we don't charge any of our devices in bedrooms.
That is really great advice. Which it also leads me to the next question around the whole new sex talk and how young people are getting into or seeing porn. What's your take on all of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important for us to be talking to our kids about sex, because they don't have reliable sources of information, but they have a lot of information. It's just not true information, right? So, when we were in my generation, our parents may or may not have spoken very much about us to us about sex. Like I knew nothing, right? But we figured it out together in reality, right? And most kids are seeing porn as early as 9 or 10 years old. And it tends to be very violent. And what we know is that, for example, high school and college boys are very confused about what girls want. They think a significant portion of them, I hope it's okay if we get a little bit graphic here, but a significant portion of them think that girls want anal sex. They think that they like being choked. They like things that they need somebody to say, you know what, that's not a thing. That's not what good sex is. This is not like, that there is an aspect of sex that is about pleasure. And I need to give you some real information about that. This is very different than like what we were trained to think, that we need to like protect our kids from, getting pregnant or getting an STD or getting somebody else pregnant or just doing it, right? If we could just wall it off, right? As something that you'll figure out later.
Yeah.
It's just not the case anymore. Right? Like these kids need information. And
this information, what age do you start telling them from? Because, I'm already down the track and we haven't had that conversation yet.
I know. So my advice is to start small, little snippets here and there, and to ask a lot of questions, because you want to find out what they know or what they think that they know. And, I think most parents are probably better at this than I am. I find it very awkward. I really don't like talking about sex with my kids. I feel like there's something just wrong with me. You know what I mean? I'm doing it and I'm like, it's your private life. I don't really want to know about it. Right? Okay, well, I will tell you, if you start right now asking them questions, there's so much graphic stuff everywhere. You just ask them if they understand what's happening. You need to ask them if they understand pornography. Start giving them information about the pornography industry, that start seeding the idea that if they ever see it, it's not true. It can be really damaging, so that they understand not to trust it. Yeah. Right? They come to you if they're curious about something, and then you can answer it in a satisfying way. Now, the flip side, the thing about that has happened to me, I've tried to have as few these conversations as possible, as short as possible, because it's so uncomfortable for me. And I'm saying to myself the whole time, okay, you can do hard things. It's okay if you're uncomfortable. All the things I say to my kids all the time, right? I'm doing it. Yeah. Now my kids talk to me about this stuff all the time. Really? They come to me with questions, and I'm so glad that they do. And it doesn't get any more comfortable. At least for me, it hasn't. I'm always like, oh God, oh, that's okay. Cool. Yes, that's so great. That's so great that you're asking me. I can see that you need information.
Yeah, ask your dad.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, they don't ask him. Because I've been the one who's having these conversations, right? And in the book, there's 15, 20, I don't know, maybe more little, these are the micro conversations to have.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh my gosh, you're inspiring me, but yeah, I'm gonna.
Yeah, I know. We all just broke a sweat. It's hard.
Now there's a few topics I really wanted to cover. One being alcohol. Once they start going to parties, you've got some parents that just go, here, take a few cruises with you, or and they start earlier. What are your thoughts? Is it just a blanket, no alcohol, no matter what, until you're a certain age? Because over here, we can obviously drink from 18. You're 21, I believe.
Yes. So I don't really believe in sort of blanket, no, never, nothing. Everything is an opportunity for conversation. But my kids are really clear about where we stand, and they're so annoyed by it all the time. They think we're just so strict. But I have seen the research, and I think this is actually really important to say to kids. I've seen the research. You do not need to practice drinking while you're young, right? What you do need to do, because the earlier you start drinking, the more likely it is that you'll struggle in your relationship with alcohol. You might not be an addict, although that does increase the odds that you will be, but it becomes something that, if you feel a little anxious, then you can't socialize. So what you need to practice when you're young, when you're in high school and when you're in college, you need to practice having fun without alcohol. That's what you need to practice doing. How could you make it fun? This year, the kids were stuck with us at New Year's, and they were like, well, of course you're going to let us drink, right? Because they're all getting so old. They would be able to in Australia. And I'm like, why? why? Like, why would we do that? Like, I don't need to drink. Like, what would be more fun? And they came up with all these games. They made a cake. It was awesome, right? Like, they had fun, and they just needed that prompting, right? So I don't provide alcohol for my kids. They understand why. I have given them lots of information about alcohol so that they understand what equates with a drink, because you see these kids drinking vodka out of water bottles, not understanding like how many drinks they're getting, and how the way that they brag about their alcohol use is a really clear indication that they don't understand it. So under the guise of, you might need to help a friend, right? I've given them a lot of information so that they're not shut out of it. And, then they go off to college and they do their thing.
Yep. I love how you say that about this is great if you want to help a friend. That's such a great strategy, isn't it? Now
they have needed to help friends.
Yeah,
too.
right.
And they, we also say, like, I understand you're going to make mistakes. And if you make a mistake and you need help getting out of it, I will never punish you for asking for help.
That's
right.
Brilliant.
So
and I
if
know
you go to a party and you end up drinking and you need a ride home, we're going to talk about it at breakfast, obviously, right? But I will never punish you for asking for help, for correcting a mistake before it becomes deadly,
that is so good. They know they're supported no matter what. You've made everything really clear of the risks, and they're weighing it up, making their own decisions, but you're always going to be there for them. That's brilliant. What I love about what you talk about is not managing our kids, but more so coaching them. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yes, I think that especially here in the US, I don't know about there, but a lot of parents become the sort of chief of staff of their high achieving kids, or just to try and keep their kids all together. And that's a very serious management role, and it's very disempowering for kids to have parents who are doing all the hard things for them, who are doing all the tedious things for them, who are telling them where to be and how to get there and all of that. Now, that is a role that comes very naturally to me. I like to give advice, right? Like, I have a lot of experience, and anyway, we have to sort of like stuff the dictator back in the box. And what we know about kids who do really well in the world, they're the ones that have parents who act more as coaches to them. And my role as a coach when I'm coaching a client is to really help my client identify what outcome they want, and then ask them the questions to help them arrive at how they will get to the place that they're trying to go. Our kids do so much better when we take this approach with them as well. When, kids, I think, naturally want to focus on what they don't like in life, and they want us to fix it, right? But if we can say, okay, I get it. If we can be empathetic, right? And say, I understand why you feel that way and you don't like X, Y, and Z. What do you want? Then they're not victims anymore, right? Then they're sort of stepping into this role as a creator of their own life. So what do you need to do to get to this place that you want to be? Then it helps put them in touch with their power.
So much more empowering, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. Now, they don't do things as well as we would do for them. And that is a really important thing for us to remember. Yeah. They have to make mistakes. They have to do things badly before they can do things well. Yeah. But if we just step in and fix everything for them, it's, not
building any resilience.
No. Yeah. I had a funny one of my kids this morning. So I did this myself. Here, I wrote the book on this, and I understand that when our kids are struggling, for example, we shouldn't swoop in and try and fix it. We should be empathetic. We should ask them questions about the outcomes that they want, all the things, right? So she comes in, and I have noticed that she has been drinking a lot of coffee. And this is like a totally new thing that, and I'm trying not to say anything, right? Like, this isn't going to end well. She doesn't have the experience, right? And she's like, I don't know why, but I am so anxious. And it's not like any other kind of anxiety I've ever had. I'm sweating, my heart is racing. And and I said, well, it's because you've been drinking so much darn coffee. And she just went bananas, right? Like, how are you invalidating my anxiety? Blah, blah, blah. Sometimes I just want you to listen. I don't want you to fix. I'm like, yes, I know.
I read a good book on that stuff.
I know that is true. And I just want to fix it.
Yeah. Well, even you slip up. That's good. We're all human.
But that's the thing. Like, then I model making repairs. It's like, oh, okay. So let's take a step back. It's so uncomfortable to feel anxious like that, isn't it? Yes. Yeah. She tells me the whole thing. And then at the end of the whole thing, she's like, I'm not having coffee tomorrow. Right? Like, she did give it to me, but she needed to be validated first.
Yes. Right? Oh, that's a brilliant little lesson for all of us. Now, if you notice your child spiraling or their mood changing dramatically, what are your thoughts there? How to step in and how to direct them there?
Yeah, the first thing is to remember that in adolescence, teenagers and adolescents experience their emotions more dramatically, right? Their emotions are amplified compared to at other life stages, like maybe not compared to toddlers, but right, compared to adults. And so, and this is developmental. They're like experimenting with emotions. And so we should expect a roller coaster, and it can be quite dramatic sometimes, and that's okay. So we don't, yes, you've got a 13-year-old daughter. Yes.
Anger.
Yeah. So, so long as there are ups and downs, and right now it's okay if there are more downs, right? That's appropriate. Kids are experiencing losses, and it's important for them to grieve. Grief is not long-term depression. It's different, right? So I don't worry too much about ups and downs, and I don't worry about, we're going through a very difficult historical period. So I don't worry about more downs than ups right now, right? I do worry when they can't seem to function, when it's not just that they seem very emotional a lot of the time, it's that they're not eating well, they're not sleeping well, they're not getting their schoolwork done, they're not reaching out to friends, they're not functioning. That is where we really want to get a professional in. And the good news is that telehealth has become much more widespread and accessible to people. So you definitely want to get a therapist involved.
What about when you say that and the child says, I'm not speaking to anyone, I don't want to speak to anyone, you can't force me, but they're still young and you need to force them. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, there is with younger adolescents especially, you're still the parent, right? And when they're ill, they need to be treated. And so, I'm not a big fan of force in any of these realms, right? And so that's a last resort. But, so the first resort is to first just be a really good listener, right? Like, get them to describe how they're feeling, right? Get them to talk about where in their body they feel anxious, where in their body they feel sad, whatever it is that they're feeling, just try and get them to start talking about what they're going through. And then you can share how you are feeling as a parent in response. I'm feeling really worried about your persistent sadness. I'm feeling really worried that you aren't sleeping and it seems to be getting worse. I know that this is mental illness, and I would like to get you some medicine. I would like to treat the illness, right? To try and be gentle first. A lot of kids want help, they just don't know how to ask for it. So making it really, really easy for them to say yes. And by helping them retain some sense of control, right? A lot of these kids feel like they've lost all of their privacy and have no control over anything. And so if you come in with force and dictate that they see a therapist, I mean, you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make her drink, right?
Yeah.
And so, so letting it be something that they choose, right? So instead of saying you have to see a therapist, saying, okay, we can, you could talk to your school counselor, or you could talk to Aunt so-and-so, or you could, do you know what I mean? Like, like giving lots of choices.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Offering a mentor within the family could be that step, that if they're feeling uncomfortable about a therapist. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a well-informed family member can be a more neutral force in offering options and treatments. Can be like, it can be really hard for adolescents to accept help from their parents because they're trying so hard to be independent. And a lot of times that is a part of the problem, right? So if you have a family friend that, or a close friend of yours that they've kind of grown up with and they know, a lot of times people will be very happy to step in.
Yeah, that's great. Looking at the future for teenagers, what are your ideas around moving forward and what we can expect and what to be thinking about in advance?
Well, you know, I think that this generation of teenagers, many of them will have learned to do hard things, right? That they will come out of this global pandemic and economic crisis. Not all of them, but many of them will be very resilient and will have learned how to deal with disappointment and grief. And these are two incredibly important skills that they will take with them for the rest of their lives. So I think a good portion of this generation is going to be more compassionate and more great. You know, in difficult times, our compassion and our gratitude is really activated. It can be, not always. Meaning, a sense of meaning and purpose can arise out of difficulty. And so during this incredibly important developmental time, this generation has been exposed to more opportunities to develop a sense of purpose because of the difficulty. So for right now, we can just try like heck to make sure that our kids fall into that category, because of course, you know, this is really going to put a dent in some kids that you know, they'll struggle for the rest of their lives. You know, so we need to do what we can do to make sure that our kids have the resources that they need, that they're not traumatized.
Absolutely. Gosh, there's so much information that you've given us today that's gold, and I need to re-listen to this over and over to let it all sink in. But if people want to know more about you, where can they find you? Through your website, is that the best option?
Yes, christinecarter.com.
Yeah,
it's got lots of free resources.
Fantastic. And so this is the book we've been talking about, The New Adolescence, but you've got your other books. And if you could just tell us a little bit about your other book so they know what to find.
Yeah, The Sweet Spot, how to accomplish more by doing less, and Raising Happiness is a book that's more about early childhood.
Wonderful. So. And anything else coming for you that we don't know about?
You know what? I have a new TED Talk about getting into new habits, even if you're still at home, that's up. So if you go to TED.com and just search Christine Carter, it comes up. So that's kind of fun. You know, I'm doing a lot of work right now on like what it's like to be at home and how can we continue to sustain high performance while we're home.
How have you personally handled the whole COVID in America when it's so difficult still? Do you feel like all your research has been what's got you through?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my habits and routines fell apart completely, and I've sort of rebuilt a totally different life. I've really enjoyed having my college age students home, you know, and I got COVID. So my kids work in restaurants and in retail. And so it came through our household. And So I'm really grateful to be alive, to be healthy now, to have, it's really been something.
How did it affect you physically? What were the feelings? No one I know has had it here, so.
I just felt like I was fighting a cold or something. I didn't get super sick in any way. Then I had really profound fatigue for months.
Wow.
And I'm feeling good. I went for a run right before this. So I'm fine. Like the fatigue and the brain fog is really scary for somebody who relies on, who's a productive person and high achiever. And it was really emotionally pretty scary to think, oh my gosh, okay, I had kind of a dark night of the soul because I never knew where I got it or who I'd given it to or any, you know what I mean? Like it's just everywhere here.
Lightning. Gosh.
Yeah.
But we all need those extra happiness tools up our sleeve, don't we?
Yes.
Now? So
yes.
If everyone has a read of your books and your strategies, I'm sure that they'll get so much out of it. And I can't thank you enough. It really is what I need at exactly the right time. So I appreciate it, and I'll be following everything that you're doing moving forward. So on behalf of everyone listening, thank you for your wisdom and your research.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's great to talk to you, Angie.
You too. And if you ever come down under, come and visit us down here in Destination.
Hopefully I will get to come soon.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks so much, Christine. We'll see you again.
All right, thank you.
Bye. If you enjoyed that video, don't forget to like and subscribe so that we can keep you up to date with all our latest content.